the Deshaun Watson rumor. Does he want out? I know a lot of Niners fans think that just because Deshaun Watson wants out, that they're gonna get Deshaun Watson. So before I send it to you, Blake, I'm just gonna
Yeah,
write the facts, right? Deshaun Watson, if he wants out, theoretically his contract is movable when you look at the cap numbers. Here's the problem. The Niners are not the only team in the NFL. And this is something I keep trying to tell people that I just don't think goes into their head. There's 31 other teams. And guess what? If Deshaun Watson's available, only the Kansas City Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks and maybe the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. Those 5 teams probably contented with their quarterback. The rest of the teams in the NFL, if they have assets, are probably making an offer for Deshaun Watson. And the Niners, when they have only 2 picks in the top 100, and I don't think they're willing to trade a Fred Warner, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, that type, right? Like, if you're trying to bring in Deshaun Watson, why would you trade everybody that you're trying to make it better with Deshaun Watson, right? Deshaun and Kyle, in theory, phenomenal fit. Would be amazing. Would be like Mahomes, Andy Reid. It would be that good. They would be a special offense. But they have 2 picks in the top 100 this year. They have a first and a second next year. They wouldn't be able to make the best offer for Deshaun Watson. And it's probably going to be 3 first-round picks, 2 seconds. It's probably going to be a trade unlike anything we've ever seen. So ultimately, I don't think this is really plausible for the Niners. I don't really think Deshaun Watson is going anywhere. I just thought we had to address that real quick.
So my thing would be if a team that doesn't have the most assets, so this kind of excludes for me the Jags and the Dolphins because those teams have tons of assets and cap space.
Jets too.
Other teams besides them, if they were to trade for Watson, you know what their team would start looking like? The Texans of the last few years. That's what their team would start looking like. And we've seen what quarterbacks go for, right? It's usually a first at least or 2 firsts, right? Watson would probably require at least 3 firsts and then some, like maybe some mid-round picks, possibly even seconds. And that just cripples your team so much. And I know he's insane, right? He's probably a top 5 quarterback, you could argue, at minimum top 7, top 8. But it cripples your team so much. And I want to point to this one example because I think how we saw it unfold was it looks amazing on paper at first. You're like, wow, we just fleeced that team. And then a couple years go by and you're like, wow, why is our roster not getting any better? It's just been the same. It's because you don't have the assets. And that's the Chicago Bears trade for Khalil Mack. So we can remember they traded 2 firsts, a third, and then they got Khalil Mack and a second in return. In 2018, you're like, wow, this team is – I mean, they were 12-4. They did lose in the first round, but they looked the makings of a team that could go deep in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just like, oh, they're one piece away. But they weren't. And it got older. They couldn't retain the people. Their offense got worse. Their defense has been getting worse ever since. So I'm very much against the idea of trading just tons of assets for that quarterback.
Right.
However, I will say, I think the Jags, even the Colts too, the Jags, Colts, and Dolphins are teams that have the assets. They have the cap space. It would make somewhat sense for them to figure out that quarterback position. It's just what you're giving up for most teams is just usually very, very implausible, and it's crippling.
So I think those are the 3 teams that are best situated, and the Jets. But with the Jets, they don't have enough people, I would say, to even make such a move because their roster is still in the process of getting rebuilt. But those 3 teams to me are the best situated to make such a move. Ultimately, looking at the Deshaun Watson rumor, I think there's no way the Houston Texans trade him. That's I'm going to say that right now. So having this conversation, we're dealing in hypotheticals. Blake brought up the great example of the Bears, right? I mean, I actually was very high on making this exact comment when they traded for Khalil Mack at the time. So I'm very happy that he made this comment. But my thing is that, right, you're great in 2018, and then Adrian Amos walks to the Packers in 2019. Kyle Long retires, and then Akeem Hicks is hurt in 2019, and all of a sudden your roster doesn't have enough depth. Mitch Trubisky isn't actually that good. You realize that. And Matt Nagy isn't that creative or that good of an offensive coach. And yeah, Khalil Mack is playing awesome, but you gave up all this money and all these assets for a guy that, is dominant. But for him to be worth $23 million, he has to dominate every single play in every single game. And that's an impossible ask of any defensive player, maybe outside of Aaron Donald. So even though Khalil Mack is great, like that's a pretty plausible comparison. Ultimately, though, I think that the big thing here is that I think both of us are on the same page. There's little chance Deshaun Watson actually gets moved. It was a rumor today. I just wanted to address it. I would love Deshaun Watson to be on the 49ers. I thought they should have drafted Deshaun Watson. I'm even more feeling strongly about that every single day that they didn't draft Deshaun Watson. It's the saddest thing. But I think that the chances of getting him, the Niners wouldn't have the best offer. There's way too many variables to look at. So, yeah.
Two of those three teams that we said would have the assets and cap space, they're in their division. They are literally in the Texans division. Do you really think the Texans like a 4 firsts and other stuff? Do you think they would really trade that?
No, they're not trading him in the division. They wouldn't even trade him in the conference. I doubt they'll even trade him in the conference because they don't want to deal with Deshaun Watson in their conference. So, yeah, he's way too good a player. We'll never see a player of Deshaun Watson's caliber get traded in the middle of their prime when they play quarterback. I just think the NFL is way too I would like to believe there's not that many stupid people running teams and doing that. And I know people keep bringing up the Bill O'Brien and he traded DeAndre Hopkins. The premise of trading DeAndre Hopkins was sound. He was an aging player. He was going to make too much money. The biggest problem was that DeAndre Hopkins was traded for a second-round pick and a bad running back who makes way too much money. I don't think anybody would have a problem with the DeAndre Hopkins trade if they got a first plus. The way the Bills got a first, third, and a seventh, I think, for Stephon Diggs. If the Vikings got that, if the Texans got that for DeAndre Hopkins, I think we would all sit here and say, yeah, they lost DeAndre Hopkins, but maybe they would have an opportunity to replenish that asset in the draft. They screwed themselves with what they got for the trade, not with why they traded him. So the